Hey, it's Dollars to Donuts with Steve Portugal.
Hi, and welcome to Dollars to Donuts, the podcast where we talk with the people who lead user research in their organization. I'm Steve Portugal. If you are curious about developing your team's user research superpowers, or if you want a partner in discovering and acting on new insights, get in touch at portugal.com. You can also buy my book, Interviewing Users, from Rosenfeld Media and Amazon. Carol Rossi is the Senior Director of UX Research at Edmunds.com. She studied and taught yoga and sees the overlap between yoga and user research as being the emphasis on observation. A long-standing people watcher, she's trying these days to set her mobile phone aside so she can pay attention to what's going on around her. Her calling is really to improve the world by making it easier and more fun to use technology. Well, Carol, welcome to Dollars to Donuts.
Thanks. Thanks for including me.
So maybe I'll ask you the sort of the first question, which is always my favorite first question, just to go broad and have you tell us about where you work and what you do.
Sure. I work at Edmunds.com. And I manage our user experience research team. And we focus mostly on qualitative research, and we work really closely with the quant researchers and marketing, analytics, other people in the organization that do research.
And is analytics different than quantitative research?
Yeah, I guess I'm making a distinction between sheer site analytics and quant research, which includes large-scale surveys. Like we have 4C running on the site, which is, like a voice of the customer tool, and other surveys that we send out to our customers.
And that's a separate part of that's a separate team from the analytics team.
Yeah, that team is run by my colleague, Michelle Schatz, we're kind of joined at the hip. We sit next to each other. We work together all the time, and we both report to the VP of User Experience, Jackie Remus. And the analytics team is in a separate area of the company. I mean, we work really closely together, but they don't organizationally report up the same way we do.
Okay, that makes sense. And what's your history with Edmunds.com?
Oh my gosh, I've been here about 4.5 years, and I was brought in actually to establish some research function here that didn't exist in any formal way before that. There had been people, kind of maybe more junior researchers here, maybe one or two at a time, and they would do usability studies or a survey occasionally, but there hadn't been any formal kind of attention to collecting and understanding customer needs and kind of keeping a pulse on the experience on the site and measuring it on a regular basis.
Do you remember what those conversations were like when you were trying to get the lay of the land and talk to them about what you would do in that role?
Yeah. I mean, it was actually really awesome because I had a chance. The first month that I was here, I literally spent every day just conducting stakeholder interviews and would sit down for an hour with, I sat down with 25 people at the company that are really, a lot of them are still here and still the people that I work with every day, in product, in design, in marketing, customer service, all these different areas, and to understand what they needed. What do you need to know about our customers? What do you know now? What's helpful? All those things. And what I heard resoundingly was, we don't really know very much. And so from there, it was almost just obvious that we needed to kind of start with, a combination of big scale, personas, brand perception research, and all the way down to regular usability studies and interviews with customers. And so, yeah, I just laid out this 18-month roadmap to get us started. And that happened to correspond with the company had just decided to move in a direction of design thinking and had hired some people to come in and train a lot of the company on really basic design thinking skills. So that was happening And then I realized, okay, the first thing I think we need to do is create personas, because I think it's a really good tool for just giving people a model and kind of the lay of the land, and at least have some idea what broad segments exist. And because I think it's really important to get people involved in like the process in order to get their buy-in, I sat down with my boss and the VP of product and said, I think we need to just take people on the road and get them out interviewing customers. And then, so we had 35 people running around the country interviewing all these people, came back into the room and did our clustering, and kind of proudly together presented the first set of personas that gave everybody a way to at least start thinking about customers in terms of maybe the things that are important to them instead of the things that we might think are important to them.
I've neglected to ask you at this point what kind of business Edmunds.com is.
Oh, we are a third-party auto website. Traditionally, Edmunds, the company's almost 50 years old, and it's been a publisher. First, we published a book with car prices, and then, we had the first third-party auto website in, I'm going to say 1995. We were really focused as a company on being experts, and we still have this amazing editorial team of, professional writers and people that keep cars for a long time and, review them over, months and a year and years. And so we can really write intelligently about what it's like to own the car. But anyway, it was traditionally a publisher, and so there was this very strong kind of we are the experts mindset. And I think that was what started to shift in 2009-ish, 2010, when I was brought in to think more about what customers need and how we can kind of give them more of what they need instead of thinking that maybe we understand that already.
So in that I guess it's the Personas project where you had 35 people out and about doing research. Were you looking at car buyers?
Yeah, because we didn't know exactly where we wanted to target. So we literally did a panel recruit in various cities and got people who either said they were in market to buy a car or had recently bought a car. And I can't remember, the exact parameters, but it was probably something like, had bought a car within 6 months and intended to buy one within 3 or something like that. So we got people that were pretty close to the actual purchase and collected their stories.
And that's the focus for much of the research that you're doing, is people who are having some relationship with a purchase.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's become, as we've learned more over the last few years, it's become more and more specific and tailored and certain, we focus on certain types of buyers and all that. And, as we've matured, our understanding of our customers, like that original set of personas, has been replaced. So, we have a much more sophisticated understanding of shoppers and who's on Edmunds. And of course, we're always learning, but we're in much better shape to target, just to target better. But it's still generally, we're still pretty focused around people actually making a purchase. And part of that is that the business of the company has shifted in the last couple of years, and we're much more focused on connecting car shoppers with dealers now than we were, 4 years ago.
And are you facing, or have you overcome or dealt with any challenges around, that's a really specific use case, I guess, or a situation that you're looking to talk to people in? And have you found ways to deal with that?
Yeah, it is very specific. I think we've learned a few things, and we've kind of evolved our thinking in terms of how we can find the best people. One thing for sure we've done is that towards the end of last year, Michelle, who's my research partner who does the quant stuff, and some people from the analytics team did a really fabulous analysis of our site users to understand who gives us the most benefit. So now we're kind of focusing on them, and we're actually recruiting people that have used Edmunds for whom we have contact info as our kind of primary market. So that's kind of more right now. Our focus has been a bit on them. We've realized that, in fact, I just had this conversation with somebody last week. We can't really expect to have shoppers be very, like, we can't go out and say, do you intend to buy a car within a month? And they'll say, yeah, because they may intend to, but then something changes, somebody loses a job or the parent gets sick and they have to take time away to do that or whatever. So there are these things that prevent that from happening. Or, for example, we ran a study last quarter and this guy said he intended to buy within a couple of months. He was looking at a couple of cars and went out for a test drive and ended up buying a car. So it can be challenging to try and pinpoint like the exact moment of purchase, but we've got some ways to either kind of be realistic about what we can get or kind of target it, people that are on our site because we know a little bit more about their potential behavior.
And that sounds like it's the product of, years of working on this and refining it.
Yes. It is.
I guess that's how you learn most things.
Yeah.
Trial and error.
Yeah.
Often the kind of qualitative research that we all do gets split into generative versus evaluative. And I don't know if that's the right framework for you, but I wonder sort of how do you characterize the kinds of ways that the research you're doing is supporting other parts of the organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is a way that we might characterize it. We've tried to be very responsive to the needs of the organization, and we've been asked to kind of be on both sides of that. For example, a year ago this time, we were asked to do kind of pretty regular usability benchmarking and focus on the more evaluative piece. At this point, in the last 6 months, we've been working really hard to get sort of ahead of the product team and use sort of an integrated research approach. So all of us are starting to come together in a more formal way. The marketing team that's doing research, the analytics team, quant and qual on our team, customer service, because they're getting a lot of feedback, and try to drive product changes and drive new business initiatives through research by answering some very specific questions. So it's actually a really exciting moment because we're getting more and more ahead of the product team. It's pretty cool.
Can you point to anything as influencing that shift?
I think there was executive recognition that we could be doing things maybe a little bit differently in a way that could help us get ahead of the competition. I'm not sure if there's a specific root cause.
So when you describe kind of the shift in, I don't know, it's kind of where the idea comes from, what the product opportunities are, I think is how I understand, this evolution. Is there a risk of something like that being a political issue? And by that I mean that is something being taken away from someone in favor of this more integrated process?
You mean being taken away from somebody else who was potentially driving that?
Yeah, I mean, it's, from the outside, I have just sort of the meanest, smallest narrative in my head that, product people who reported to so-and-so used to make decisions about things, and now they would dictate what was going to get made, but now they've lost that power. And again, it's a very negative characterization. But, I wonder, how does that manifest itself inside your teams?
Yeah, I think I neglected to say that as part of this integrated research team, we have product people and designers involved. So in the past 2 quarters, we've spent 1 quarter each doing an ethnography project. We're in the middle of one right now where, I'm paired with a product person or 2 and designer, and we're together running the whole deal. So we take this business question that's been given to us, we figure out some of the logistics. I mean, my team or some other people helping will kind of work through the recruiting and that kind of business. But the planning of the study, the executing. So everybody goes into the field. Everybody's involved in understanding what the objectives are and laying those out. Everybody's involved in regular reports to the executive board that check in on this process as we're going along. Everybody's involved in running the study, so everybody goes into the field. Usually we have me or another researcher leading it, but there's always one of the product people or designers is there as the co-researcher. We all get together and do the whole affinity diagramming and understanding what we've learned, extracting the trends and insights. And then the other thing that we've added now is that we all work through an ideation to come up with some product concepts directly resulting from those insights. So everybody's kind of, going through the process together. So at the end, everybody feels ownership of it. And I mean, like I was saying, when we did the first set of personas, we had some of these same people actually out in the field, and we've always gone into the field with a partner from product design, other, areas of the company, marketing, Fed, whatever. But this time we're saying, no, the partnership starts at the beginning and it goes all the way through, instead of maybe involved in the planning or maybe running the study or, one or two phases along the way.
That's a much happier narrative than the dramatic one that I was constructing.
Yeah, it is. It's a pretty happy narrative so far.
I love that.
Yeah. I just don't see the point in going out, especially for field research. And even when we do on-site usability testing, everybody's in the room. We have a researcher in the room with the participant and also, again, one of these, co-researchers who's from product or design or whatever. But we've got all these other people in the observation room watching, and we're kind of building the, affinity diagram during the study. So by the end of a day or two, everybody's together, everybody's on board. I mean, it sounds more kumbaya than it, there's it. Let me put it this way. It works pretty well because this is a very collaborative environment, like seriously collaborative and fairly non-competitive in a really good way that I haven't seen at every company I've worked in, that's for sure.
It just makes me think how far the field has come. And I don't just mean the research field, but all of the fields. Because I think the dominant, I think about, more than a decade ago, that sort of the dominant narrative was, and maybe this is still true for a lot of places, but I used to hear a lot about, well, how do we get the engineers to come to the usability test? How do we get other people interested in what the research is doing? But I feel like, as you're describing, and it's certainly consistent with what I see out there talking to people and working with people, is that there is a real interest and a real hunger for, across the disciplines, for learning, for understanding what's going on with people so that we can all do a better job together.
Yeah.
So I'm doing a little kumbaya, but I mean, it just seems, I think maybe it's one of the consequences of just, my age is that I remember sort of some of the bad old days, and I don't always see that, the world has moved on and that a lot of those problems we dug our heels in kind of at what felt like the early days just aren't there. And, it's not trivial to do what you guys have done and establish that kind of collaborative culture and then put a program in place. But it seems like the conditions are there in workplaces in general where that can actually happen. Yeah. And there was a time when, you would be, winning an Academy Award for what you just said. It was so in a new category that I just created. I don't know. I mean, you have I think you and I have similar times in the profession. Do you see that we're in another era from when we all started?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, it's funny because I remember I worked for one company, which shall remain nameless, years ago. And that was like when we were still called human interface people or human factors or whatever. And we couldn't even get into the field. I mean, it was like a battle getting into the field, and it was an enterprise product. So it wasn't like, you could go to a panel company and get participants. I mean, we needed these business people, and it was really hard to get out. But the other thing that's funny, I've been reflecting on this lately. I think I had my career began in probably a really odd way because my first job in college. I was a senior in college. I wasn't even in graduate school yet. And I worked for Honeywell. And we were, I mean, it's, it sounds so ancient, but we were making training simulators for like F-16s or something. And the reason I'm telling the story is that, they had all these interns, me and like 6 others who were undergraduates or graduate students in like psychology. And we were working with a subject matter expert from the Air Force and a programmer from Honeywell. And there was somebody else. There were like 4 people on these teams. And we each had like a section of the airplane that we were responsible for. And we worked together. All of us sat in a room. Like these Air Force guys would come from, I don't know, Arizona or something for like 6 weeks at a time. And we'd work on this thing. And then they'd go away and we'd develop something. And then they'd come back. And I just thought that was normal. It's like when you're a little kid and your family is a certain way and you think that's normal. And then you go off and you go to other people's houses and you realize that like other houses operate differently. And that my career started with this like totally collaborative team thing happening. So I thought that was normal. And then I got other jobs where that wasn't the case. And it wasn't until, like the internet, like 15 years ago or whatever, so a few years later that collaboration became like the way to do things. So yes, I'm seeing exactly what you're seeing and maybe more. Yeah.
I wonder if this was a podcast about some other part of a business operation like HR or accounting or something. I wonder if what we're describing is just a shift in the Western workforce and kind of professional cultures, or if it's specific to our field, which is still very young.
It's hard for me to answer that because Edmonds is this like freakishly collaborative place. I mean, you've been here. We have this, for example, we have this workplace experience team that like I've never seen anywhere, with these really awesome people that like they can just they can make anything happen. In fact, one of them has become our chief recruiter. She's like amazing. She gets these amazing participants just by talking on the phone to these people. So yeah, I'm probably in like an extreme kind of environment for that kind of thing.
One of my favorite stories about, meeting people at Edmonds was someone from the workplace experience team had someone who was traveling, I think, outside of your area, Los Angeles, to go to a conference. It wasn't like travel agency stuff like here's your hotel, but they were really helping them with a new life experience, which was to go on a business trip. And I thought that was just it was an interesting sign of the times. And, I had sort of I felt my age. I'm like, wow, no one helped me do that kind of stuff. But how great that, that there's just so much thoughtfulness put into that. And so, I mean, to me, I took that away as kind of an indicating characteristic of your workplace culture.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
So since you mentioned recruiting, maybe I'll use that as a pivot here. And can you talk a little about, who else does research? Who's on the team that you manage?
We are in the process of backfilling. We had someone on the team for like 3 years, and so we're looking to replace him now. And there was a period when Michelle, who's my counterpart, was on the team, and she shifted to be her own team. So yeah, as far as the people that report to me, it's me plus a researcher. We have a coordinator that we're also hiring, and that's somebody that's going to do recruiting and work on another area of the company, and that person's going to report to our VP of user experience. And then the other people doing research are in other organizations. So like our brand strategist and marketing is doing a lot of brand research and marketing kind of, ad studies and stuff like that. So the other people are the ones that we coordinate with.
Okay. So what do you look for then when you talk to people who, I mean, I'm thinking about maybe the backfill example that you mentioned. So you're looking to bring someone in that role. What do you look at when you talk to candidates?
Yeah. I'm looking for somebody who, because I call it the small but mighty team, I'm looking for somebody that can really take the lead and a fairly the title is Senior User Experience Researcher. So we need somebody who can move forward, who can work really comfortably with teams. We need somebody that plays nice with others and also has enough attention to kind of all the logistical details that you have to pay attention to be his or her own project manager in terms of making things happen. And we need somebody who can wear a number of hats. So field research, usability studies, some light survey stuff, some attention to quant, although you don't need to be able to do, big analyses. So because we're a pretty compact team, we need somebody who can kind of do a lot of things, but really focus mostly on qual and being able to lead a project.
I was speaking to somebody today at lunch, and they said they made one of those declarations that they acknowledged they couldn't back up, but it was an interesting hypothesis. And they said, I think you can get away with being a crappy researcher longer than you can get away with being a crappy designer. And it led me to think, in the situation we're talking about, how does one assess, you meet a candidate and you're thinking about not only all these hats, but, this field research piece is important. How do you assess somebody in terms of that?
I ask them to tell me very specific examples or stories about experiences in the field and how that's led to specific products that have been implemented. So I'm looking for some kind of, how do they tell the story? Someone told a story that was really compelling the other day in an interview. And it helped me see, it helped put me in the room with him and the participant. It helped me see a level of empathy, but it also helped me see how he turned that into the product that he described that they made as a result of that experience. I mean, I'm giving you one example from one, visit, but I'm looking for first of all, the ability to tell the story, because that's a big piece of it. I've seen a couple of resumes lately where it's like, I know this person's got some skills here, but the way that it's being conveyed, it's not quite I'm not engaged, So we have to be able to advocate for the stories we're hearing in the field. And actually, I think I was talking mostly about shoppers, but we're also doing research with car dealers, so it's B2B and B2C.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be able to tell their stories and represent them, and also, roll that up into insights and be able to take action. So I'm kind of looking for how they articulate how they do that. And, in some cases it seems like, and now I'm not there with them. What's the quality of their listening skills? I don't really know, So I don't know if that's what your friend meant by you can be a crappy researcher for a longer time. But in terms of the process, I'm looking for a way that they can articulate the process in a way that it's clear that they understand it. And I've been asking people this question, tell me how you deal with feedback that you get in a 360 or something. We all get this positive feedback, and then we get occasionally something that we need to work on. And what I'm finding is that, everybody says, I always want to work on it, but the way they answer the sort of talk about it a little bit more, it tells me something about, the character of the person. So
it reminds me a little of your point about when we realize that not every family is like the one that we grow up with. I mean, it just feels like those realizations about how you've defined the world around yourself continue to happen. And I think to me, feedback is something like that, that you reach a point of expertise and confidence, and there's something that you didn't know about doing that. And those feedback opportunities are tremendous, but also terrifying. Mm-hmm. Because it's there's things that we need to improve, but sometimes that feedback is no matter how compassionately it's done, it still kind of pulls the rug out from under you, because you realize, I think if you hear it well, it can be really like, oh my goodness, I understand the world differently now, and I don't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Your story reminds me of trying to talk to someone, getting stories from people about their field work. And I had somebody that dug themselves a hole. They were on a bad project, and that was the story they had chosen to tell me. And every follow-up question I asked them, like, I think they were doing a good job, but they were basically hamstrung in a subcontracting gig that was like wrong and shouldn't have been sold. And, but they couldn't. It was just sort of, to your point about the power our ability to tell a story says something about us as researchers and about as collaborators. And I could see the person just sort of following the story's trail, and it was just taking them down, down, down. And I tried to say, well, what's another, like, try to lift them all the way out of it. What's another story you could talk about, another project where things didn't happen this way and you were given the resources to do your thing? And the poor person just could never get out of it. And, I guess that's a good thing for me to have experienced in the interview, because ultimately I didn't end up working with them, because you don't want to see that happen. You don't want that to happen in front of one of your colleagues or your boss or your client or anything. I want to go back to something that you said as you were describing this point of evolution, which I think is really remarkable, because you talked about how this integrated team is presented with a business question and then comes together to figure out that. Do you think that this integrated team, I don't know what to call it, but all y'all who are kind of doing this design thinking basically to be innovative, is there a role for that in that group, in that team, to be identifying other business questions?
Yeah. I mean, I just had this with somebody, this conversation, not literally in that way, but just that we want to be open to, you do research and you end up with more questions as well as insights, right? So we want to be open at the end of this quarter to be able to say, here's what we learned and what we want to study as a result, because we think it could have an impact on the business, and have that feed into the conversation about what the next quarter's business question is going to be.
That's nice. You answered that much better than I asked it. I knew there was a reason I would talk to you. So then maybe that there's a bigger question that I've been thinking about. And I guess this is not speaking to you about Edmunds.com specifically, but Edmunds and the other places that you've worked and kind of how you've seen the industry evolve. What's sort of the maybe it's the platonic ideal, but what do you think research does for a company? What is its benefits?
It's so variable from one place to another, right? I want to think, and I am going to go to the platonic ideal, if you want to call it that. What I want to think is that what research does is both create some way of thinking about the people that use our, in this case, website, service, app, whatever, as humans, as people that are trying to solve a real person problem. So in terms of like giving us empathy for the people that are our customers, and again, I mean like shoppers or car shoppers or car dealers, I hope it does that. And I hope it also expands the business, and gives us some sense of pain points that can be business opportunities that these people are experiencing.
And making that connection.
Making that connection so it's not just, so people aren't just, statistics, and the business isn't just operating based purely on intuition without people data, because the fact that there's a big emphasis on ethnography now, and this probably answers the question that you asked me earlier that I wasn't really coming up with an answer at that point. It's like, this is a very quantitative company, and it's been like they've been looking at big numbers for a long time. I mean, Edmunds is a website that has 18 million visitors a month, so they're used to big numbers. And I think, what research does for us right now in focusing on field work is to make it really human through very specific stories that can balance the numbers. So I feel like, both creating empathy and giving a human experience to the people on the other end of whatever we're offering, and also to impact the business in a positive way.
Part of what you're describing the benefit of a research as is that it humanizes people. It takes them from data to being, real people that we can empathize with. And I just, why is that important to a business?
I think it's important to a business because we're not just putting something out there. It's not, if we build it, they will come. It's like we need to create something that somebody wants, whether we're in, a completely generative mode and we're like, this thing doesn't exist and we're trying to figure out it does, but it fits a need somewhere along the way. There's no reason to create something unless it's going to fit a need because we want people to engage with it. So to me, that's like, unless you understand the story, what's going on in that person's house, how does this iPhone app fit into their lives? Where are they using it? What are they trying to do there? What are they trying to do on the website? Whatever. Yeah, I just feel like you have like a very shallow picture of what's possible. And I think also, we can get a lot of the what through the numbers, but we don't know why, right? So we know what people are doing. We can tell you who's clicking where, but why are they doing that? And that's kind of that's the transition that we've made in the last few months with like very specifically, okay, here are the people on the site that are the most valued to us. They're the ones that are making us the most money. Let's go to their living rooms and study them. Let's find out why they're doing these behaviors that we like because they're good for the business. Why? What can we do? What value are they getting? And what can we offer them that maybe we haven't thought of? So I don't know that you can know that if you're just looking at the numbers.
That's great. That's a great way of explaining it. Maybe I'll switch topics a little bit again and, talk about or ask you to talk about you and what is it in you gave us this one formative story, I think, or a story that may be formative for you with this Air Force project. I'm wondering, if you look back your own trajectory and, what's core to you as a person, what is it that makes you great at what you do now?
I think what makes me engaged in this is that I feel like I'm kind of a do-gooder and I want to feel like I'm creating a really fun and engaging experience for people with technology. I mean, I love technology. I guess that's part of it too. And which sounds kind of odd because we all use it every day, but there was no internet when I was a little kid. I mean, I talked to my 15-year-old nephew and he's like, what do you mean there was no internet? So I don't know. I'm still kind of intrigued by the gadgets and stuff. I think it's really cool. And otherwise maybe I'd be doing something else. I mean, that's where, because I left the field for a while. I thought I wanted to go to graduate school and get a degree in anthropology and become an academic, and then ended up coming back into it because I realized I like technology and I think it should be fun and useful for people. And I want to be a part of that.
And I like that you frame that as being a do-gooder, because I think I just feel like socially we have a very immature and unnuanced view of that word, that, a do-gooder picks up trash or rescues kittens or, pays for babies in Africa to have fresh milk or something. Like there's a lot of sort of obvious, and those are all important things that, need to happen. But
I've probably done all of those. Yeah.
Okay. That's good. You're gooder than I. There are many, many, many opportunities to do good and to think about our work as something, to approach one's work to say that, I'm going to do good at this and I'm going to improve things and enable other people to have something better in their lives. It doesn't mean that, you're getting rid of fracking or something. It doesn't have to be, the thing that keeps us all awake about the worst things in the world. That there's lots of ways to shape the world around you that fall under the category of doing good.
Mm-hmm. I think it took me a while to get to that, but yeah, I agree. I think I had that pretty narrow view of it, even though I consider myself to be that type. But yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That sounds like a little bit of self-actualization to be able to say that, hey, what I'm doing is putting good back out into the world in some way. Someone asked me, I don't know, it was about a year ago, they asked me sort of about my service. They sort of said, like, what do you do? And, I had to think about that because, where I live, there's a thing where you can go and clean up the beach. There is like a thing where you can go pick up trash and like trail cleanup day. And I never do those things. And, the question my answer on the face of the question was like, well, nothing, because I don't, volunteer out of this or do that. But I started to think about other things that I do. And, I think it's sometimes we have to kind of search for that. That's me personally. But I would suspect that, in our field, people are drawn to it because that's a thing that has meaning to them, that they are improving things.
It's funny. This is going to sound kind of, these personality systems, like there's the Myers-Briggs and there's one called DISC and there's one called the Enneagram, that the type that I am is called the reformer. And when you read, like, who is that type? It's all people trying to do it. It draws draws a certain personality type for sure. So
the reformer,
yeah.
Can I ask you about your war story that you wrote for our series?
Yes.
Because I think we need to link to it as part of this, and it seems like I should at least mention it.
Sure.
Well, here's the question. I guess someone's listening to this, and what would you say to them to get them to go read your war story, which is linked right here?
Oh, what's the most compelling thing of the piece of this? So, yeah, in the spirit of what we were talking about earlier, like, running an interview and taking somebody who's not an interviewer with you, I was taking with me the guy who's the VP of editorial. So he's responsible for all these people that like write these really awesome articles on the site about cars and review them and whatever. And he hadn't been out in the field like this before. And we went and he said, well, I'll drive and I'll take one of the cars from the editorial fleet. So we go downstairs and we've got this like $100,000 red convertible BMW or something. And we're driving to this really terrible neighborhood of this section of Hollywood that's like really not so great. And yeah, we get to this guy's apartment and it's really dingy. And it was quite an enlightening experience for Scott, my research partner. Yeah, it was kind of a fun story.
Good. And there'll be a link to that for people to go and read more. And this is totally me sucking up or setting you up to say what I want you to, but hey, I'm the host, so I get to do that. What do you think the War Stories project brings to our field or to people that are learning about it?
Reality. It's a total reality check. And I mean, they're fun. Some of them are not funny. Ours is kind of, some of them are you really become quite pensive, with them. But yeah, I think it's reality. I mean, it gives somebody a flavor for what really happens and the kind of all the other stuff that happens. It has absolutely nothing to do with exactly what you're trying to capture, but that's the person, that's the whole picture. It's kind of what I was saying earlier about making people human for your colleagues, to get the stories. It's yeah, sure, it's about how they bought the car and how they got the price and what they thought of the dealer and all that stuff. But it's like, what's this guy's living room like? And he and his wife live in this tiny apartment with this baby, and he's like 45 years old, and she looks like Giselle, and you're trying to figure out the backstory, and it's kind of it's the reality of the real human experience that goes with the business question and the product that you're trying to develop and all of those things that are important. Yeah, you can't make this up. We interviewed somebody for this coordinator role who's a comedy writer, and I said, if you work here, you're going to have more material. So
yeah, it's interesting. Those stories kind of taken in the aggregate, and all of them have abstracted away any actual research content but they sort of have distilled that element of the humanness of field research.
Mm-hmm.
What didn't we talk about yet that we should talk about?
You know, this has nothing to do specifically with Edmonds, but I think, you were talking about like the evolution of the field. Last week, it was announced that 15 community colleges in California are going to be able to offer BAs for the first time. And because, they offer AA degrees, but not BAs. And the BAs were chosen based on the ability to train people in a field that's important and relevant in the neighborhood of the college. And Santa Monica College was just awarded their first BA in interaction design.
Wow.
And yeah, wow. It's kind of crazy good, and really points to, we're in quote unquote Silicon Beach, and more companies are bringing themselves to LA. But yeah, it was like a pretty big move for the field. And I glanced, I didn't read in detail all the other schools and what they're doing, but a lot of them are like, really dental hygiene. Like you need that, you need people to do that. But yeah, SMC got a program in interaction design. So that's pretty awesome and a pretty good sign of the times, I think.
Do they need instructors?
Maybe.
Yeah.
We will find out.
Yeah. Since you mentioned you like to teach, so.
Some of us have teaching experience, and that would be a cool, yeah.
Well, now we're putting it out there now, so.
We're putting it out there. One can do that and do this job.
Yeah. Do you have any questions for me?
So how's it going? How are you feeling about your new series? This is fun.
Yeah, you're someone I'm able to talk to after the series exists, because the first few interviews were ones that I conducted before it was posted. So it's kind of, so there we were talking about the series in the abstract, and now as I'm talking to people, well, they've heard it. Yeah, I'm enjoying it. I mean, I've been getting good feedback from people, and someone said something really nice to me the other day. They said, I wish you'd been doing this for 5 years so that I could have all those to kind of go back and learn from, which is sweet, but also sort of an exhausting thought. Because I don't know that I would continue to do it for 5 years. I mean, this project seems to make a lot of sense now. These are conversations that aren't being had. We don't get to hear a lot. We hear a lot about design and about user experience and about design thinking. But we don't hear a lot about research and kind of how it walks and talks in the corporate environment. And for me, it's exciting because what's changed over the last few years is that there are many, if not most, of the leaders in our field are in roles like yours. And I think there was a time when those people were in roles like mine. But, you and your ilk, if I can use that word, you guys are doing amazing stuff. So I'm loving getting to hear these stories and hear from people. And, it's one of these things where we'll just see where it goes and what value it has for people. Someone said to me that they thought these would be interesting to people besides researchers. Mm-hmm. And I'm getting a little bit of that, like other people listening to them. So it's possible that, you gave this lovely articulation of what research can bring. And that's, I think we would like more people to hear that. So if this draws a broader audience than just us kind of insider baseball stuff, then I think that's good for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's evolving, right? I mean, it's brand new. And I think that's kind of a theme for the whole, to me, it seems like maybe a theme for the whole series, because I've listened to there are only a couple are out at this moment, so I've listened to a couple of them, and the theme seems to be, it is evolving. Our understanding of the process and how we need to be and how we need to engage with the rest of the organization is evolving. And yeah, it seems like nobody's really got a set in stone process, at least of the people that I've heard you speak with so far.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But I think the evolution is tremendous based on sort of where we all started. And
yeah.
This is like so much recursion. We're now in an episode of a podcast talking about the podcast. I thought only Howard Stern could kind of do that, but.
Oh, geez. Yeah, no profanity here, though.
No. Yeah, I think we have a clean rating in the iTunes store. We don't want to lose that.
No beeping. No beeping.
All right. Anything else, or is that does that take us to where we want to get to?
Unless you have any other questions.
I'm really happy. I love this conversation. So thanks for taking the time and for sharing all these stories and giving us a lot to think about.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for doing this. This is really great to be a part of it. I appreciate it.
Very good.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dollars to Donuts, and thank you to everyone that helped me put this together. You can get links about this episode, listen to other episodes, subscribe to the podcast, and read the transcripts at portugal.com/series/Dollars to Donuts. And you can buy my book, Interviewing Users, from Amazon or from Rosenfeld Media. Get in touch with me at portugal.com to start exploring how we can work together.